just go. Once you're there, you'll be enthralled by the place.
What's the main purpose of Feli?
Yeah, so, well, thank you. It's a great question. One of the most fundamental things is that very early on, we happened upon this discovery. And the discovery that the missing piece to scale Bitcoin is community. Right now, we see these two strands up until Fedi. One is this strand towards individuals, which is great. Individuals improving themselves, learning, education, which we need to do to get billions of people using Bitcoin. On the other side, we see competition. We see multiple companies working together, competing against each other to get to better and better products, which is again good. The fires of competition leads to great products. But there's this human technology that has always existed since the beginning of mankind, which is community, where people collaborate, where they don't compete with each other. They don't just work by themselves, but they take the strengths of each other to work together towards a common goal. And there wasn't a technology that took that power of community and used that, combining it with other technologies like Bitcoin and Lightning, like Fedimint, like Nostr, in order to level up communities and humanity. And that's where Fedi comes in. We take this power of community that already exists, this ability to form relationships and work together, and then we use technology to augment that, to supercharge that, to empower communities everywhere.
What is a community, and what about the Bitcoin community?
Well, this is actually quite interesting. You're right. We talk about the sovereign individual and empowering ourselves. And the way you do that is you learn and you don't take things on face value, you verify. We've had this culture in worldwide, which is where we don't verify, we just blindly trust. And so when Bitcoin started, this culture had to change. We really needed a clear narrative. So it was around don't trust, but verify. And that was a call to people to learn, to study, to improve themselves, and to question, which is good. But trust is a powerful tool. If you can form communities, modern society wouldn't work without some level of trust. If you had no trust at all, then I wouldn't trust that this seat is going to break, because how do I know it was manufactured? I have to make my own seat. Anything I eat, I have to make sure I make it myself, because how do I know it's not got poison in it? Any car or any transport I use, I have to build the car myself, service it myself, because I'm having to trust. So you have to trust thousands of people implicitly every day to be able to survive. And even in the Bitcoin community, as we say, the answers in the question, even though we have learned to verify, we still have created really strong bonds globally from different cultures, different backgrounds, different genders, multiple differences, but we share this one common sense of community around this understanding that it's important to learn to verify. So over time, what I expect to see is that there's this concept of trust, but also verify. That's the final form. That's the most powerful thing, where you learn through time, through verification, who you can trust, but you still can maintain the discipline of regularly verifying as well. That leads to the end outcome. So what is community? Community, and strong community, is ones where each individual is strong and able to verify and support the community, but they use the power of collaboration and trust in others to level themselves up even further.
Can you tell us about your experience with communities?
So there's a lot of questions there. First of all, are we proving our thesis that community is powerful? Yes. Are there a lot of learnings? Absolutely, more than we ever expected. And also then to go back, you mentioned that we'd launched already. So we're going through those multiple phases. The first phase is we did this Fedi Alpha launch, and we had a number of communities who were interested in using our product, but we decided to focus on a few and get the initial learnings. So we had our first Fedi app, which is this super app for communities. So it's your chats, conversations, money, and data and more, all in one very, very simple to use app. And so we had an idea of how it would work based on our experience from multiple different countries and backgrounds. We built this app and we started with the first communities. And this was earlier in 2023, this year. And we had all these hopes and dreams of what would happen and expectations. And the reality was that they were not completely wrong, but 80% wrong, let's say that. We learned that we need to do much more in certain respects. There were so many different problems that we didn't consider that had to be dealt with, which meant that we had to go back to the drawing board and revise some fundamental aspects of the app. However, the core of the app, the core thesis that bringing everything together in one, bringing money and conversation and data into one app, using and also utilizing the community to sort of work in tandem with this app and provide features that you couldn't provide separately, and augment things that communities already do. That core thesis seems to be, the more we go through, the correct thesis. It's just that being able to deliver on that requires this iteration where you listen to communities and the community members, and then are willing to change whatever is needed to change to make sure you end up with a final product. So that was the first phase. The second phase we're going into next is where we will launch to a wider set of the communities who've already signed up. We have hundreds of communities who want around the world of different sizes and types in multiple countries, although the most are in the global south and post-Soviet regions, but there's a global desire. We will go with another set of communities and roll out an updated version of it based on the feedback from the first few, and they will be able to start using that. So it's a wider set, and once we're comfortable with that, then the next phase after that will be a full public launch. Now that we've tested it, we have several dozen communities using it for a period of time.
You are working on privacy too. Can you tell us about it?
So that's on the Fediment website, as opposed to Fedi. So actually, it's useful at this point to clarify the difference between the two. So Fediment is this incredible protocol. It's an open source protocol like the Lightning protocol and like Bitcoin and Nostr. It was originally invented by one of my co-founders, in fact, called Eric Syrian. And it's this community custody protocol that allows you to custody Bitcoin and other assets and it's run by trusted members of the community. We call them guardians. And on top of the custody, the community custody of Bitcoin, it also allows you to have privacy, extensibility using the Lightning Network, and also speedy transactions and interconnectivity. And it's run on behalf of a community. So it allows you to easily add functionality that a community will run in a way where there's no single point of trust. So that's what Fediment does. Now, what Fedi does is we take Fediment, we take Bitcoin, Lightning, and other what we call freedom technologies. And Matt Odell, I think, coined that phrase first. Freedom technologies, and we combine them together in this one super app for communities and community members. That's one part of Fedi. So think of it, the difference between a Lightning wallet producer and the Lightning protocol. They're two separate things, or a Bitcoin wallet creator and the Bitcoin protocol. So Fedi makes the Fedi app, which is a super app for communities, which uses the Fediment protocol and Lightning and Bitcoin. But the other thing that Fedi does is, that's the tech side of Fedi. The other side of Fedi is the human side. So what we have realized is when you want to roll out globally, especially to the communities that need it the most, they need a level of human support, both remote support and on-the-ground support. And so what we have is, we call it the Fedi Order, and we have Fedi Knights, who are people who locate communities, educate them, and provide incredible support for them. If you're in the West, you might be aware of Apple stores, and they have the Genius Bar in Apple stores, where if you have your Apple iPhone, and you have an issue with the phone, you can go into any of the Apple stores that are all around. Unfortunately, they're mostly in the West, but you can go all around any to them. You walk in with your phone, and the Genius Bar will help you and deal with any issue you may have. And that's what sets apart the iPhone experience from, say, the Android phone experience, where with the Android phone, they're both, the app technologically, they're very similar, but you're on your own. You have to sort of go online and figure it out yourself with Android. With the iPhone, you have this support network supporting you, at least in the West. What we want to do is be this sort of the genius bar, decentralized genius bar for the global South and post-Soviet regions, or where people are disempowered communities, so that if they have a problem with the Fedi app, they can actually be in contact with someone, and potentially someone locally who speaks their local language, understands their local context, to answer any questions they may have, whether it be how to use the app, but it also could be, well, how do I buy Bitcoin? How do I sell Bitcoin? And they can give an answer that makes sense locally to them. Or what else can I do with this? And then we can say, well, maybe you can use certain other services, Bitrefill or Bolts, or I can name many. There are many services that could make sense for people to use. And because they can all be integrated and run from within the app, people can have this one integrated, simple experience. And again, the Fedi order can help educate them on how to not just use the app, but use all these other Bitcoin services that are out there that people are not aware about it. So the point is, when Fedi wins and and a community wins, the entire Bitcoin ecosystem also wins, because there is no one app that can service all of the community's needs. So we have to educate people about these other related and complementary apps.
Speaking of the geographical choice, can you tell us how to choose the main focuses?
I think, so demand is globally, but in terms of when we're deciding where to go, we decided to go where the need seemed highest. So there's lots of people who want it, and then there's some people who want it and need it, where they're dealing with potentially high inflation, or they're dealing with a situation where they have no viable banking options. They either cannot, they don't have the banking options that you would consider reasonable here. Either they have none, or the banking options are incredibly expensive, or they're not functional enough, or they just can't trust the banking options. They're not reliable. The banks go bankrupt very often, or for various other reasons, it's not safe for them to use local banks. It's the same with chats and conversations. Some places in the world, you may want to, and it may be preferential to have conversations where you know that the actual conversations are being managed by your own community, and you're not having to rely on a third party, because that could put you into danger based on the conversations you have. So where communities need communication that they control, money that they control, data or privacy that they control, that's where we decided to focus on initially. These are also some of the toughest markets. And our view is, let's find, this was a phrase of a famous American president when they went to the moon, John F. Kennedy. He said, we go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it is hard. And it's the same for us. We try to find the most difficult markets, and where we have the most challenges to try and get something to work, whether it's connectivity challenges, whether it's language challenges, whether it's cultural challenges. And we try to roll out to there first, because the theory is, if we can go some way towards resolving, getting it to work there, and even better, if we can get it to work there, then it will work anywhere. And in fact, when it works in other places where they don't have these challenges, it will be even better, because of the fact we forged it in the fires of a much more difficult, challenging environment, as opposed to go to the easy market first.
What is the most frequent criticism you receive, and how are you working to resolve it?
I think the most common criticisms come around the fact that at the end of the day, the fundamental way a Fediment will work is that you need a group of trusted guardians who are custodying Bitcoin on behalf of the community. And so if those guardians were to collude with each other, work together, and they could take the Bitcoin, for example, that they are custodying on behalf of the communities away from the community. So there are different mitigations for that, but that's the fundamental risk. And they could take it away, or they could take some of it away and hide that from the community. But ultimately they could do something which involves taking Bitcoin away. So the mitigation number one, and we've been very open about that right from the day one, and we communicated this. And this is why, ultimately, if you can do it, if you can afford to do it, and you're technically strong enough to do it, self-custody is always the best. But it's just expensive for people to do. It will get more expensive over time, the expectation, and it's technically complicated. And although systems are coming in place to make that simpler, right now it's a very complicated thing to do. So the mitigation number one is to use the power of your community. So the guardians, you have a KYG, know your guardian. So the idea is, if when you're joining a federation, you're not comfortable with who the guardians are, then you shouldn't join. If you're semi-comfortable, then you should only store very small amounts with that. It might be good for a half a day, the amount of money you would take out to spend in an evening, for example, but not for large amounts. Whereas communities that you trust very well, for example, your family community, where it might be your parents holding the key and brothers and sisters holding the keys, you might trust that more, for example, and there will be things in between. But the choice of guardians is the first key mitigation on that. And then second, prior to Fedi and hearing about and FediMint, I was actually a Bitcoin exchange operator. I ran the UK's longest running Bitcoin exchange. And one of our claims to fame was that we were the first and longest running performer of something called cryptographic proof of reserves. We ran it for 8 years. I don't believe even to today there's any company that ran it for as long as we did consistently without fail. And so the idea of putting in place a mechanisms for proving reserves was something that was very, very important to me. And so very early on, this was in 2022, I believe, or in fact, early 2022, I was talking to Eric, and we were thinking about ways in which we could be able to do this. And we realized there was a few ways you can do it, but it involved this thing we called rekeying. Well, it was something that Eric called rekeying because I gave the challenge, he gave the solution. And so behind the scenes, we've been working to add that functionality into Fedi, but we want to do it in the Fedi way, which will be really, really easy, really seamless. So as a user, there will be some regular process as you upgrade your FediMint to over time, because we're going to add features over time. Each upgrade gives you transparently, invisibly, it gives you the opportunity to effectively check that the guardians are still solvent, that they haven't taken any money. And by knowing that this check will happen, it will prevent guardians from trying to take, because they will know that at some point there will be an upgrade and they will be found out.
If there is one question you could ask Satoshi, what would it be?
I would ask them, how do you feel now?
What do you like the most about Lugano so far?
It's not the weather. I like the people, and I'm talking. The people in general I've met, I've been fine, but the Bitcoiners that I'm surrounded by, I always love that.
What do you think about Lugano becoming a Bitcoin adoption hub?
I think, and this is my second time in Lugano, I think it has a lot of potential as a Bitcoin hub.
Did you have the opportunity to buy something with Bitcoin in Lugano?
Yes, I bought some steak. And it's a very Bitcoin thing. I bought some steak in Gabani, a restaurant on the first night I arrived.
What other cities can learn from the Lugano Plan B experience?
I think focusing on rolling out at the education level is a key thing. So education is one of the things you can focus on. And also showing broad support for merchants to accept Bitcoin. And those are the two things: from the bottom up, the young generation learning, and from across the economic area, aspect of a community in terms of the merchants.
If you have to convince someone to go to Lugano, what will you tell them?
I would just say it's a beautiful place. It's one of the most picture postcard um, cities that you can see in Europe. So just go, and once you're there, you'll be enthralled by the place.